Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Adbena, and I'm the Program Manager of the Microsoft Reactor San Francisco. I will be sharing session resources with you in the chat, but before we begin, I would like to quickly review two items with you, our code of conduct and our event guidelines. First, please take a moment to review our code of conduct. Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We do encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. And secondly, our event guidelines. This session is being recorded and will be available on demand through the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel in about 24 to 48 hours. Which brings us to today's session, introducing Managed Airflow in Azure Data Factory. With this session, we'll run approximately for 60 minutes, and I'm going to bring in our speaker for today, Abhishek Narayan. Hello, Abhishek.
Hey, Alvina. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
So let's get started. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are across the globe. And so I'm super excited today to be talking on a very newly launched feature. This is in public preview currently, and this is known as Managed Airflow. And we'll talk more details about this functionality. We'll also go through the demo, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions that you may have on the chat, through the chat, and I'll make sure I take up all those questions before the end of the session. So with this, let's get started. So a quick introduction about me. So I'm Abhishek, and I work as a principal program manager in Microsoft Data Integration team. And the products that we have in the market is Azure Data Factory. And today, what we're going to talk about is how you can run your Apache Airflow DAGs in Azure Data Factory. So let's get started. For folks who are not aware what is Apache Airflow is one of the most popular and widely adopted OSS projects for programmatic orchestration of data workflows. So considering that, you can imagine that it has a wide user base and a community backup who are kind of focused on writing Python and doing programmatically authoring, scheduling, and monitoring workflows. These workflows are defined in terms of tags, and you kind of have different kinds of operators to kind of make it, easily usable, connected with different data services, data sources, and orchestrate have a more of a rich orchestration through code. Now, it has a strong OSS community driven project, a lot of code check-ins, which basically means that this Apache Airflow gets immense amount of updates, fixes. So that makes Apache Airflow probably one of the good choices for an orchestration tool. It's code-centric, so if you're coming from a Python background, you would love it because you don't have to learn anything new, and you can get started from the knowledge that the skill set that you already have. And of course, the customers who have existing tags, is basically the data pipelines, is how you define the acyclic graphs in Airflow, and that's how you kind of build your data pipelines in terms of tags written in Python, and within that you start defining different tasks and operators, and that's how you kind of put your business logic in those operators. Now, it's highly extensible, as customers can create their own operators, executors. You can extend libraries so that it fits the requirement using provider packages, custom plugins, and so many things that you can do with that. So in this session, we'll focus on how we can leverage the goodness of all these things with Apache Airflow on Azure with the native managed service. And this is the feature we are going to talk about today, which is Managed Airflow. And we already talked about what Airflow is. It's an open source tool used to programmatically author, schedule, and monitor sequences of processes and tasks, which is referred to as workflows. And with ADF, we are kind of bringing existing Airflow user base as well as customers who require to run the Airflow tags into Azure in a fully managed Airflow environment. So you don't have to worry about setting up an Airflow environment, which you earlier used to. If you have set up an Airflow environment on Azure, you would know how much of pain it is. Sometimes you use an ARM template. Sometimes you start with Kubernetes, and then you start setting up things like images and Python libraries, and then after doing all those installation, you deal with network security, authentication. There are tons of things that needs to be done as a data engineer before you start consuming Apache Airflow on Azure. Now, we wanted to solve that problem for data engineers, and that's why we have this managed Airflow capability, because there's no doubt about what Apache Airflow is and how powerful it is. We just want to make it super simple for anyone who's using Azure to get started with Apache Airflow. And considering that, these are certain key features that we'll talk about, which are already available in preview, and some of them are being added in preview as we move on. And some of those features, which we'll see in the demo, is setting up the Airflow environment is super simple, and super easy as a data engineer. Many times when we talk to customers, it becomes challenging to set up the infrastructure that Airflow requires as a data engineer, and that kind of becomes a friction area point, delays the projects, and so many different things happens over there because of that friction. And so we certainly intend to solve that one. Then auto scaling of workers. As a data engineer, uh, it's more challenging if you have to get into IAS and set up scale conditions and things like that. And that requires at times infrastructure folks. And so again, this becomes a friction point. So auto scaling is a key capability that uh, we want to offer with this managed offering. Then comes security. May it be authentication, right? When using Apache Airflow, how about using Azure Active Directory and combining, best of the breed solutions together to get you a good authentication authorization solution along with, Apache Airflow orchestration. And that's what we do with this solution is we integrated this natively with AAD. So you get all the beautiful functionalities on Azure with Azure roles, RBAC, role-based access control functionalities, single sign-on with your Apache Airflow as well. So bringing best of both the worlds together, making a more secure solution, and all those things are logged as part of the AAD logging, the resource logging, who logged in, who logged out, and things like that, what operations they did. You get a beautiful log out there. Then you have the built-in security mechanisms like CMK encryption, that's customer managed key encryption. Basically, it's a metadata encryption using additional customer key. So all our metadata in Azure Data Factory service is already encrypted using our keys, using Microsoft managed keys. You can additionally add further, bring your own key as a customer and double encrypt these metadata as well. So it kind of makes your infrastructure super secure while it's managed by Azure. So that's the functionality that you get out of the box. Streamline upgrades and patches with any software or tool. You have a challenge, and how do you upgrade it? How do you patch it? If there's a security flaw, how do you fix it? Does it have a downtime? That all these questions that comes up with your setting up your own Airflow environment, and all those things are managed as part of the managed Airflow, and will kind of offer upgrades, patches, and security fixes as long as as the Airflow community rolls out those fixtures. So we rely on those and make sure that those fixes are updated into the environments that customers use as well. So it becomes more streamlined, easier, and non-breaking for customers. Of course, the major version upgrades will be something that the customers will do, but the minor version upgrades, which doesn't break customers, is something that we'll take care of and streamline that particular process. Enterprise workflow monitoring through Azure Monitor. Again, a very important feature on Azure is like all these solutions on Azure and applications on Azure typically use some kind of logging mechanism and for analysis as well, certain kind of metrics to set alert against and so on. So there are ton of functionality built on in Azure Monitor and log analytics there. And so we made sure that we have this integration point with Apache Airflow, managed Apache Airflow, and Azure Monitor as well, so that you can get, again, best of breed, bring together two different best of breed solutions with the Azure monitoring solution, which can give you like an enterprise grade monitoring system. Of course, Airflow supports integrations with multiple other monitoring systems as well, and you can use those. But then if you want a more native integration in Azure, you don't have to do anything. It comes out of the box, integrates with Azure Monitor. All the logs and the metrics are kind of pushed down there, and you can set alerts to things like, when the CPU goes above this height, send me an email, or if there's so many jobs queued, send me an email, kind of thing. So it's very easy to kind of set those metrics and alerts without having to write any piece of code. And that's out of the box offered here. And then Azure integrations, as I say, Azure integrations. So if you're building data pipelines on Azure, you're relying on a lot of different Azure components. Could be Azure Databricks, it could be Azure Data Factory data pipelines, or data flows, or copy activity. For example, there are functionalities in Data Factory which are code free and which offer you 100 plus different connectivity stack, like with native connectors, native high scale connectors, which can get the job done very well in terms of data movement, in terms of data integration. And then you can use orchestration in terms of running transforms using notebooks, SQL scripts, DBTs, and so on. And that's where Airflow comes in together, and it needs the ability to connect the different dots, on Azure. So, copy data at scale using data pipelines, and transform data at scale using, for example, Databricks, or data flows in ADF, which is kind of visual transformations, provides you an option of visual transformations. So these are different data artifacts, or I would say data workloads, or data processing systems on Azure, and we need native integrations into those. So thanks to the Airflow community, that there's huge bunch of providers, the Azure provider, there's huge contributions in that from Microsoft, and of course from partners and from the community, which kind of makes it so simple and super easy to kind of integrate with those Azure things. And we are fully committed in terms of enhancing that to add more integrations based on customer feedback that we receive as well. With this, let's move a step forward. So this is on the right hand side is the UI that you would see. It's already in public preview. So we are introducing the Airflow environment as a new runtime in the integration runtime. Integration runtime is typically the compute that Azure Data Factory uses, and we have multiple types over there. You already see you can run SSIS. If you SSIS is SQL Server Integration Services. If you're using SSIS packages, on premise or anywhere, you can bring them onto Azure and you can run it there. You can run native pipelines, data movement, or the copy activities, or the data flow activities using the Azure integration runtime. That's the first option here on this screen. And then we have a self-hosted integration runtime, which enables connectivity to on-prem data sources, or data sources which are behind firewall, or even across cloud, multi-clouds data sources. It helps you connect to those data sources to integrate them onto Azure. And so with this, we are introducing a new option here, which is Airflow, which lets you it brings you a managed Airflow runtime, and you can use that. You can bring your existing DAGs, or you can write new DAGs and have them run on this Airflow environment. And the features that you would get out of the box, we talked about that in the previous slide. A few things, CI/CD. I know this is kind of very critical. Data ops is extremely critical for any customers building data pipelines. And so that's one of our key considerations here. And this is still work in progress. That's why we have the tag called preview. But you would imagine that over the time, we would have a very well-defined CI/CD solution for the managed Airflow, so that you don't have to manually push code. You have more automation around it. We already have REST APIs, and so which you can use to kind of synchronize your Airflow environments from a blob storage. But we'll go in more details to see how you get started with it. So we'll go through the getting started steps. Before we get to the demo, one last slide, which is how does ADF stack up, and what is the vision and the goal with supporting Airflow DAGs? And it's all part of Azure Data Factory. So Azure Data Factory is kind of open data integration service, which now includes running native pipelines. It includes running SSIS packages, which can do orchestration as well as data movement, data integration. And then we have the green bucket over here, the green boxes, which is basically the new announcement, new offering, and we're going to talk about that in this session, is the Airflow runtime, and the artifacts that you bring here is the Airflow DAGs and directed acyclic graphs. Those are, and those are the that like code based or Python based logic that you write in a data pipeline. In case of SSIs, it's the SSIS package. In case of pipelines, it's the pipeline JSON, right? And then it kind of enables customers with existing investment in Airflow to bring their Airflow tags to Azure lift and shift. It helps you modernize your Microsoft data integration as well, using all the different tools that we have to offer in Azure Data Factory. Now with this, I'll spend good amount of remaining time in the demos, and I'll actually run you through each of these smaller things. How do you get started? We'll import some pipelines. We'll go through that experience, and let's get started with the very first thing of creating an existing Airflow environment. So you can quickly get started with adf.azure.com. That's the short link that you can use to log into Azure. The prerequisite would be is you should have an Azure subscription. It's an Azure service. So Data Factory is Azure PaaS service. And so it requires Azure subscription. So you can start with adf.azure.com, and then you can choose to create a new data factory in case if you're exploring this capability and you don't want to have this in a particular data factory, you can always use a new one. We have a new experience where you can actually create a new data factory right from this UI. So as long as you have the permissions, of course, to create a new resource in your subscription or in your resource group, you would be able to do that. Or you can simply choose an existing one. In this case, let's choose an existing one. I click on continue, and it takes me to my data factory called Data Factory Demo Factory 101. Now, in this, I have a home tab, and how we are introducing this capability of Apache Airflow is through the Manage Hub. You can quickly go navigate to the Manage Hub, and you will see an Airflow option right in here. Now, I have created multiple environments, and I'll continue to create a few more during this demo. But the point here is that even if you don't have any expertise on Azure Data Factory, it just requires you 2 clicks to get started with Airflow, because I just did 2 clicks, launched a data factory, or create a new data factory, and then launch that and hit the manage button, and you will be seeing Airflow right over here. So it's just about 2 or 3 clicks, as long as you have an Azure subscription, and then you get started with creating a new Airflow environment. And it's as simple as you give a name to the environment, description is just for your reference. Then what functionality we added here is you can choose whether you want to integrate it with Azure Active Directory or continue to use a basic auth, right? Basic auth is common, especially if you're using a dev and test environment. You may want to kind of use this. We certainly recommend using Azure AD integration authentication, because obviously it gives you a single sign-on experience. It integrates with Active Directory. It brings in the same user IDs to log in into Airflow. You have a better audit trail, audit logging. All those things are done at Airflow level. You can enable those at AD. It's already enabled at the AD level. You can enable it at Airflow level as well. And for now, what we have done during the preview is we have limited regions, which we have documented where this feature is available. So in case if you're using some region where it's not available, you would not be able to see the Airflow option over there. So for that, you can refer to our documentation. In that documentation, we have region specification where these features are available and the regions where we'll be adding it soon, as coming soon regions. Now, with this AD integration, we'll show you how it behaves. Let me quickly go and explain the other properties here. The compute size is basically letting you choose VM types that we would be using under the hood, small or large, and it defines how many kind of processes it can run in parallel, or pods can run in parallel with respect to scheduler, web server, and worker for both of them. And let's say I choose large. You can see I can have 6 concurrent workers here. And then I can enable autoscale, which is kind of coming soon, this box, but then I would be able to say I can set my workers between, let's say, 0 or 1 and 10. And then it'll make sure that when I need more workers based on my DAG runs, it just goes and scales up and adds more nodes based on the requirement, then scales it down when there's less load onto the Airflow environment. So we'll be adding that quite soon. So keep uh, um, keep a tab on that. And then for now, you can choose an extra node in case if you want, and you would see that the workers start to increase. So based on your DAG requirements, execution requirements, the parallelism that you require, you can kind of choose how many extra nodes you want. And then the Airflow version, we do have a single version for both 2.x as well as 1.10. Because we heard from a few customers who were using still 1.x and they wanted support for that. So we just wanted to make sure that we have support for both 2.x and 1.x. You might not see the latest version of Airflow here. We are committed to upgrading this once in a quarter or even sooner than that. But then we do want to kind of run version lower just to make sure it's kind of stable when we roll this out to customers. And then we have a few other fields, which includes things like overriding Airflow configurations. Like if you have a local Airflow configuration file and you want to override a few properties into this Airflow environment, which is managed by us, you may do that as well using the configuration overrides and specifying key values over here. I am not going to use this right now, but then you have environment variables, which you can use. And then finally, the most important part, which is the Airflow requirements. And so in case if you want something, any provider that you want installed, and I'll take an example. Let's use the Microsoft Azure provider, right? And I'm just going to make sure that I install this particular thing into my environment. And you can do this later as well. So there's no necessity that you need to do. You can specify versions as well. Make sure the Python providers are installed or pre-installed on this particular environment. You can always update this environment as well. We'll see that. So don't worry if you have missed out any Airflow requirements while trying to create an environment, you can always update that. So with this simplistic thing and filling a few fields here, you can hit on this create button and give it about 10 to 15 minutes, and it'll have the whole setup up and running for you. And you can see the version number, the authentication information. You would start to see notification on the right top side, which will kind of keep refreshing based on where we stand right now. For example, it's starting right now. Once it's ready, you will start to see running. If in case something bad happens and if it fails, you will start to see message and troubleshooting instructions and so on. So while it takes about 10 to 15 minutes, let's go and do some other preparations in terms of getting the tags ready, and then we will import those tags and things like that. So before we get there, I would want to show you the experience, the single sign-on experience. While this takes some time to set this up, I do want to show you, we talked about you can update an existing environment as well. So if you click on these three dots, you will have an option called edit. You can see the same edit icon here as well. This is how you edit an existing environment. And you can, in this case, you see I have installed Trino provider, and I can add a new provider into this environment, and I click on apply. Right, it's as simple as that. And that would basically make sure it first saves the updates that we did, and then it's quickly stopped that the node that needs to be stopped so that we can install these libraries, and then it restarts them. Then now it gets back to the running state, and you'll get a notification shortly saying it has been updated, or the Airflow 8 has been updated. So it takes a quick few seconds, and you see successfully set up Airflow 8. What it meant is the Airflow 8 is now ready with the provider packages that we just installed right now on this machine. So I can quickly log into it while our new environment is still getting started. And I click on that monitor icon, jumps into the Airflow UI. And this is pure Airflow that you would see. So this is the single sign-on experience. It basically takes my ID, logs me in, and you're right here in this particular Airflow environments. You can actually see your profile, and it'll show up as me. And I can even go ahead and create custom roles now. You have these options of um, under security, you have roles. You can define, a new role record, and then you can assign different users these roles as well. So this is how you would kind of go ahead and start building your custom roles. Say, I want to give this specific tag access, or I want to give read-only access or monitor access to a particular set of existing ADF users, right? So it kind of acts as a double protection. You already need to have these users as part of your data factory as contributors. And additionally, you can do fine-grained ACLing using the the Apache Airflow roles on top of the Azure roles. So this gives you uh, literally, double control in terms of how you would want, who you would want to access this Airflow UI and do what operations on top of it. And now let's, before our environment is all set up, this is still the Airflow 8 cluster. So we will give it some time for the Airflow 9 to kind of become into the running state before we start importing the files and running there. Before I go there, I would want to show you the files that we would actually be uploading into this environment and quickly running through that. So the couple of files that we have two tags here. The first tag, what it does is it calls an Airflow an existing ADF pipelines. It calls two existing ADF pipelines. It uses two different operators. One is a async operator. The other one is a sync, a run pipeline operator. So the run pipeline operator does is it basically calls or invokes an existing ADF pipeline. So I can specify my pipeline names in here in this as part of this operator. You see Azure Data Factory run pipeline operator, and you can see the imports that I have done. Import Azure Data Factory run pipeline operator, and it's all part of the provider package that we just installed, which is airflow.providers.microsoft.azure, right? So you're using that Azure provider packages contributed by a community and different organizations, and then leveraging that to be able to kind of call an existing ADF pipeline. Of course, this operator or this provider does create a connection as well in Airflow. So you have to kind of go to the Airflow connections, create a connection so that you can authenticate into the ADF environment. That's the current experience. And then you will be able to execute this piece of code. You can see the scheduling logic in here, the catch up, the definitions that Airflow has. And then it uses the connection ID. This is the connection I was talking to. So I have to create in this code. It leverages Azure underscore data underscore factory underscore demo factory 101 is the connection name. So I need to create a connection with this particular name and make sure I put in the right SPN and the authentication information so that the code can leverage that, and the operator can leverage that, and then authenticate into my data factory and be able to execute these pipelines. Now, I have run pipeline 1, I have run pipeline 2. So I'm kind of calling two pipelines, just that, one of them will run sync and the other one will be async. And it's kind of printing the labels here. And the whole goal here is that you can call ADF pipelines in a sync manner or an async manner, and then poll, for its status information. That's what pretty much this tag does. And you'll be able to visually monitor this as well when we get to when we upload the tags and monitor it. And the other one is the basic tutorial. So not much logic in it. I just copied the tutorial from the Apache Airflow source code and then brought it here. So it's a sample hello world kind of a sample tag, which just prints the date. And then I would use both of them. And I don't see much of an import here, nothing that we need to additionally import from provider package. So it's going to be a simple one. This one would require some kind of a setup, which we'll do. And by the way, whatever I'm showing is also part of our documentation and tutorials on our documentation site. So you can find it right over there. Now, let's get started with the next step, which is making these files available and ready ready for being imported into the Airflow environment. So let's go back to an Azure portal, because what we would do is we would put these DAG files onto a blob storage or ADLS Gen 2 storage, and we would upload the DAGs and plugins in case if we have a plugin, or if we had a plugin, we would create a plugins folder here as well. So I have a storage called Data Storage 101. You can use your storage and containers, and I have a container called Airflow in it. And then I have a folder called DAGs, and this particular DAGs folder contains the two files that you just saw. One is runadfpipeline.py, the other one is tutorials.py. They're both are Python files. It's the same piece of code that you saw there, and you can validate it if you click on it and edit it, and you will be able to see the values, the Python file, the code as well. But we will validate that in the Airflow environment, so not a problem. So now this is very important. One of the key thing here is that you need a structure such that you create a folder by DAG's name or plugin's name, or whatever you do today within your existing Airflow environments in your file system, whatever folders you have, we will ensure that we clone the same folders in the managed Airflow environments as well. So feel free to kind of create similar hierarchy or structure that you already have for your existing Airflow environments in the blob storage, pointing through a container or through a folder, and just mention this folder while importing the files in the Airflow environment. And I'll show you in a bit how do you go about doing that. So it's still setting it up, and I'm sure it should be done in just a couple of minutes. What I would do is I would just use the Airflow 8, which was still the environment where there are no DAGs. This was the one which we opened up earlier, and you would see that there's no DAGs right now. What we can do is we can quickly go ahead and the import process on the Airflow 8 environment while the Airflow 9 is being set up. And I can do this, click on import files, and I can choose a storage account. Now, link service in terms of Data Factory is nothing but a connection to a storage account, right? So if you don't have one, if you're starting fresh on Data Factory, you can click on plus new, and this is how you would be able to set up a connection to your storage account. It's as simple as saying choosing a storage account from one of your subscriptions if you have permissions to list your storage accounts on the subscription. If you don't have that, just choose manually and put in your storage name, account key. In case if you want another authentication mechanism, you can choose SaaS URI. Don't use anonymous, not recommended. Just anonymous kind of lets you connect without any key and stuff for a public storage account. That's not recommended. We just did it because some customers do want to access, Azure Open Datasets as an example, and then you have that option. Otherwise, you would use SaaS URI or account key, service principal, system assigned managed identity as well, which means you don't have to manage keys anyways. The storage account will allow list the Data Factory name, and then Data Factory can access your storage account and clone the files on your storage. So you don't have to pass any kind of key in this whole process in case if you use system assigned managed identity for uploading the DAG files into your Airflow environment. Same with user assigned managed identity, right? So this is going to be super simple, creating a storage connection and then importing files from the folder, which has DAX folder inside it. You don't have to choose the DAX folder. So I'm going to use my existing storage account, which I created, Data Storage 101, and I'm going to browse, and this is the same storage account that you saw in Azure Portal right there. So I'm going to use my Airflow container, and the Airflow container contains the DAX folder. That's exactly what you saw here, the DAX folder, and it contains, a couple of tags inside it, which we want to import. So here, I'm just going to choose the DAX folder. I'm not going to click on the DAX folder, not go inside the DAX folder, because I need to be on the root where my DAX folder, plugins folder exists. So I need to be seeing these folders, not the files inside it. So I would choose this and click on OK. Don't mention, in my case, I don't have anything in directory. What we also included is requirements.txt file. So while setting up the environment, you saw we had an option of installing provider packages, all the Python libraries that you would need on the Airflow environment. Now, on top of that, what we did is we let you import requirements from the requirements.txt file as customer feedback. We do understand this is how the community works. There's a requirements.txt file where you can put in all your plugins or all your provider packages that you want installed on the setup, and we can do that for you. So while importing the tags, you can provide requirements.txt file, and then we'll ensure that all the packages, like if you had hundreds of such providers being used, you can mention that in the requirements.txt file. And while importing it, we'll go through each one of them and make sure it's available on the Airflow environment that you set up in the 10 minutes, 15 minutes window. Right. I'm not going to do that because I just did the setup. During the setup itself, both models are available, whichever works better for you. So clicking on that import files in the Airflow 8 environment, which is running, it says files listed, 2 files copied to Airflow 8 environment. Now we would go back to the Airflow 8 environment and we'll give it a quick refresh to see if it's running the pipelines. Now you can see that you are able to see 2 DAGs, and both the DAGs in the code, it was in a state to run. One was running once in a day. The other one had a difference, once in daily. One was one day at 12 or midnight UTC time. So you would see those informations here, the schedule information and the executions, the ones which are in progress in the green, which are running. You can click through it. You can go into the details. You can start monitoring your tags, the different tasks within the tags, the different states. You can see we were testing a async wait with sensor and no async wait, where we were running a data pipeline, both the data pipelines, and this is kind of for the one which we are doing um, uh, async. We were actually polling using a run sensor. So we were getting the monitoring information till the pipeline is executed, and then we were finishing our tag. And you can monitor all this information here. So this is how easy it was to get to creating a new environment and then being able to import the tags, existing tags. Of course, you can author the tags in VS Code. You can author it, any tool that you already use to author the tags. All you have to do is bring it onto Azure Blob Storage or a Gen2 storage, and then simply import it into the Airflow environments, and then start monitoring your Airflow environments with a single sign-on experience of monitoring those tags. So this is how simple end-to-end it was, starting with creation, then importing the tags by putting them on the blob storage, and then finally monitoring your Airflow environments and your tags and so on. Now, before we move on and we look into the health of the newly created Airflow 9 environment, which we just kickstarted during the session 10, 15 minutes back. This is functional now, it's in running state, and you can launch and you can start to see things in that environment as well. But then nonetheless, we went through the Airflow 8 and creation of this Airflow 8 environment. But one thing I do want to show you, just validate the provider packages that we installed. So I'm just going to click on edit and show you it has the Microsoft Azure provider packages that we installed as part of it. And we could have done like Databricks and DBT, whatever you wish to install, whatever your tags requires, you can do it via this. And then when you log in into the new environment that we just created for you, you can now have the same single sign-on experience, and you will see no tags here because this is the newly created environment. But then if you quickly go through the configurations and plugins and providers, and you will be able to find the Azure providers that we just installed right here, over here. And you can specify a version as well, otherwise it picks up the default version. But then this is how easy it is to kind of install providers. A lot of these providers are pre-installed, by the way. So I'm sure the Microsoft Azure provider is pre-installed as well. But then any provider that you want to install additionally, or a specific version of that provider that you need to install because your tag depends on that, this is how you would go about doing it, either via requirements.txt file while importing the tags, or via the creation of the Airflow environment, specifying those requirements right there. Now, the next thing that I wanted to talk about and show you was metrics. We talked about that in the beginning. Airflow has metrics. It has a beautiful integration with monitoring systems and so on, which is all good. And you can carry forward with those integrations with the managed Airflow as well. But what we additionally offer in ADF is if you open up the same demo data factory 101 that I had, where I had my Airflow environments. Um, Demo Factory 101. Now you would see you can set alerts, and when you do that, you can create a new alerts. You can see different metrics on which you can create alerts, and now you would see there are a bunch of you know alerts that you're starting to see with respect to Airflow, which wasn't shown before. But then these are things that are more makes it more enterprise monitoring capable, integrates it with Azure Monitor, brings in best of both the worlds together, and then you can now see that you have metrics like uh, you know task timeout errors. Like if your tasks are taking longer time because it's timing out due to some issues in the code or some issues in the environment, let me notify me on those, right? So you can simply click on it and you can see how many such instances are happening over time or over count over time and so on. So it's super simple, and we have bunch more than 20, 30 different kind of metrics that we exposed here. um, you know DAG processing timeouts, anything that you would want to see manage with respect to DAG runs. Imagine these metrics were already available in Apache Airflow. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're just integrating these metrics into the Azure systems as well, so that Azure monitoring system can fire alerts for you, send SMSs, emails, whatnot, based on the different requirements, and you don't have to additionally configure things in Airflow. So you can kind of standardize things in Azure and plug in Airflow into it as well to get those alerts and stuff. So this is one thing which I wanted to certainly call out, that as part of this integration, you get all these capabilities, additional capabilities like additional advanced monitoring via monitoring uh, Azure Monitor and log analytics, all of them as part of this kind of capability with the managed Airflow. And with this, I know that we have about 15 to 18 minutes left. What I would want to do additionally is show you or quickly validate the pipelines that we are also executing from ADF. So if I quickly, in our sample tags, we were calling two ADF pipelines, if you recall. And these two ADF pipelines that we were calling, let's have a quick look into them. So if I go into my monitoring, I would see a bunch of pipelines which were executed. Some of them failed, at different times, but these pipelines were pretty much triggered by those tags that you saw in the Airflow code, right? And you can see the same names: performance underscore 1000 GB was the pipeline name. Other one was event processing with data flows, and both these operations pipeline runs can be seen here in the ADF monitoring as well, that they are invoked. And then you can see the durations, and you can even go inside each one of these files to see what went wrong or why did it fail, and things like that. So ADF provides you with already rich monitoring to understand your issues that is being faced, where things failed. It's very visual, as I said. It can do large scale data movement, and then you can also find issues when it happens, and why it happened, and so on. So
Abhishek, we have lost sound, so if you can please make sure that we have sound again. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Perfect.
Thank you for the reminder. So I was just about to say that this is the demo that I wanted to show. So any other questions that we have, I'm looking at the chat right now. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer those questions for you. Okay, quickly switching to the questions, and I'll be kind of reading out these questions as I see, and please bear with my screen. So I think that's fixed now. Are there any situations right now where you would recommend a continues to run their customer continues to run their own Airflow cluster instead of using managed Airflow? That's a great question. Um, I would put it this way, like it's very difficult to ask customers to migrate things, right? I know migration is a big pain, and as a customer myself, I would not put that as a top priority for any customer, right? Unless customer is facing a problem. For example, if customer is facing a scale challenge or management issues with the existing environment, that is where I would probably recommend this is why not look into it. But if you're saying if customer is super happy with their existing Airflow environment that they're using, I don't think we need to push on this capability. We just want to make sure we take load from the customers and give them better experiences, but then it's still the same Apache Airflow. So if customers are happy with their existing environments and so on, they can continue to use that absolutely. But in case if they are facing problems with scale, say facing problems setting it up, delays due to project setup and things like that, and that is when this becomes a de facto, or probably they want to have a single tool for everything, like their factory having their pipelines, orchestration of pipelines, SSIS packages, data flows, Spark query, everything together in a single place. That's when they would recommend. But it completely depends on customers' needs and priorities. Next question. Can we use managed identity with Azure services such as ADF itself? If so, how? And which MI would be assigned to Airflow? Someone was out during that part of data connections. Okay, so right now it's not possible. The only integration with MI is when you're importing the DAG files. So when you're importing the DAG files from the storage into the cluster, since that happens in a managed environment, we are able to use managed identities right there. But uh, and we are also considering a feature where we will be able to use things like Azure orchestration using managed identities, but that's not available today. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of security, in terms of making sure there's no exfiltration of tokens by any chance and things like that. With managed identities, we have to be careful, but certainly that's a feature on our backlog on how we would integrate so that you, from your DAG itself, instead of using a connection and passing an SPN there, you are able to leverage either the user's logged in token, or you're able to leverage some things like managed identities to authenticate via your code files. Now that's a feature on our task list. Another question, how can we add secrets example, through environment variables without these being put into ADF's Git configuration. Okay, now the current integration that I showed you is not integrated with ADF's Git, which means all these uh, all these things that you're putting. Um, no, actually, you're right. If you have integrated uh, Git um, in 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 the environment, it would write these files into the Git, which I think is the problem that you're quoting. And I think that's a very valid feedback. I would recommend you to disable ADF's Git or create a new environment with Airflow, and so that you don't enable that Git capability there. We are also working on a feature which is native integration of Git with Airflow environments directly without going to the ADF Git. And we would take care of such things over there. So I would recommend for now, and that's why this is in preview, recommend you to kind of disable Git at your factory so that you don't have those secret informations stored in the Git for now. And thank you for your feedback. We will look into it right away. The next question. Can we import environment variables in a similar way that requirements.txt file works? Example, environment file or similar? Yes. The answer is yes. I actually showed you a glimpse of it when you were importing tags. There's an option of environment requirements.txt file. If you check that option, we expect requirements.txt file in your folder where you are actually having your tags and plugins placed. We expect requirements.txt in the same path, and then we will be able to import all the requirements based on that file. Hope that helps. That's what you're looking for. If not, please post your question back again. How can we bring legacy Airflow workflows to Azure platform? That's the reason why we do support the version 1.x as well. We do expect a 1.10, 1.10.14 being one of those versions widely being used right now. And there's a reason why we support that. So using that, you can bring your existing tags, older tags, which are running on the previous version of Airflow, into the ADF managed Airflow as well. If you're looking at something more than older than these versions, or it's not compatible with that 1.10 version, do let us know via the chat. The specific version that you're looking at will be able to look into it offline. I have a confirmation. Environment variables are added to Git. I have tested that. Thank you for testing it. And we know. Thank you for confirming that. And I think it's part of the IR payload, and hence it just gets added in there. But that's something that we should consider on kind of encrypting it and making sure it's not visible to the users, and then you can continue to use the Git. So that's something that will be a follow-up on us. Question 3. My question was for handling secrets like requirements.txt, using, for instance, a file in Azure with secrets in a file named or similar. Give me a second. Okay, file name environment. That's actually a great feedback. We will look into it. For instance, file name.env. So that's a comment from Halvor Litny. So we'll certainly look into it and how we can make it work in that seamless manner. Thank you for your feedback. Question from Pierre. Is there a plan to integrate Airflow runs directly into ADF monitor in the future? That's a great question. We did consider that. So in the future, we can certainly add that. Just that we want to make sure that we don't have to change anything in Airflow. So I think the first version was to make sure the existing Airflow is kind of a managed service as is today. And then the next set of functionalities on top of it is how we can improve on the existing experiences. And this is where we need your feedback. So please use feedback.azure.com and add your feedback over there. I would highly recommend doing that so that we can capture these requirements, and we can make sure we add it into our plan. Do give us more information around how would that particularly help you, or a specific feature capability that you are specifically looking it to be available or integrated in the Azure Data Factory monitoring system, because we feel that's very awesome for an existing Data Factory customer, maybe a little bit of learning for an Airflow customer, and that's why it wasn't there in the first cut, but we can certainly take this as a feedback from you. Next question: Will Synapse have the Airflow DAG capability in it? That's an open question. I don't have an answer to that right now, because it kind of we'll have to discuss that internally. But then we'll get back to you. You'll hear from us on that one. So I don't have an answer on the call right now for that. Okay, and then finally I see a link. We are about on time, and then I see a final link, which is you can use this link to give us feedback, reach out to the React team uh, about the survey event. Do feel free to reach out to me on my Twitter handle. Any feature requests, any things that you find, or anything you found missing in this integration that you would like to see on. And thank you all for providing your comments, coming up on this session, joining this session, making it interactive, having these beautiful questions, making us think through and push boundaries. This is super awesome. Keep coming up with these feedback across feedback.azure.com or Twitter, anywhere. Just make sure you provide all your awesome feedback as you just did in the session. And that's about it on my side. Thank you, everyone.